That'll be the opener right there. It's perfect.
Okay, I'm recording
now. Welcome, my lords, to the Well-Earned Comforts podcast. I'm Sam.
And I'm Seth.
Thank you for joining us on the Walls of Isengard as we explore the many works of Tolkien and discuss life. We're glad to have you as part of the fellowship, as there's no telling where we'll be swept off to, and if we have not talked for a while, a lot of life has happened between Seth and I, more so with Seth than me. We'll get to that here in our Babbling like Butterbur, but I'll just jump in. Seth, over there in Michigan, you guys finally got some snow. What's life like for you? How you doing?
Yeah, we definitely got a little bit of snow. Not a whole lot, but it's stuck around. We're dealing with 0 degree temperatures with, -11, -12 real feel currently. But it's just today and tomorrow, and then it's supposed to get a little bit better. So we'll see. Quite chilly out. But yeah, as you mentioned, life has had a lot going on. We welcomed Benjamin Andrew, our son, to this world. Amanda was going through, it's called prodromal labor. It happened with Evelyn where she was in labor for a week, but this time it was like 2.5 weeks that she was in labor, where she was having contractions that were, if she was moving around, they were consistent enough to be considered like active labor, but they weren't productive. So there was no cervical change with them. And she was just miserable for 2.5 weeks. And so they, with her gestational diabetes, they decided to induce her at 39 weeks. I guess that's the pretty standard protocol, which, believe it or not, was actually kind of cool because it just so happened to be on Tolkien's birthday. So we welcomed our son into this world on Tolkien's birthday. I thought that was pretty fitting. So
absolutely.
Yeah, we've been going through those newborn struggles for the last 2.5 weeks. It's been the adjustment from, I don't know if it's been harder from 0 to 1 and going from 1 to 2. There's aspects that are easier. There's certain things that you have as muscle memory that you know how to do that you don't have to think about, whereas you were learning the first time through. But having a 2.5-year-old that just requires so much time and dedicated attention to her games, to her talking, to everything she wants to do and communicate with you, and then just having this little angry being that, quite frankly, just cries and doesn't sleep a whole lot, and it's it's been a lot, but we're definitely thankful for him. We're looking forward to, both Amanda and I say this, but I don't understand how anybody loves the newborn phase where people are just like, oh, they're so dependent on me and cute and cuddly, and all we do is, it's like, no, the newborn phase is a phase that both Amanda and I will be more than happy when it has passed. And then we actually get to see a little bit of personality and get to know our son, as opposed to just him screaming at us at all hours of the night.
Right.
But anyways, that's what I've got going on.
Man, yeah, that's fair. You give me a lot to look forward to, as we're just about 2 months away from having 2 ourselves. And so Ariel's doing great. She's still, trying to work out as much as she can. She kind of bummed her knee, which has been a struggle. And then, of course, obviously being lopsided with extra weight in a belly of, a human being inside of her, like not able to do as much as she was like would want to at the gym and stuff, but she's still very active. And but yeah, overall we're just really trying to savor these last few moments of just Baron. We're trying to not spoil him a little bit, but just be more intentional with him as we come close to that time where we know he's gonna have to share, and he's not gonna like that at all. He's very we've noticed it, especially the last, I don't know, maybe a couple of weeks, he's been super clingy to Ariel, especially. Like, I'll be reading him a book, he'll grab it out of my hands and he'll literally throw it at Ariel to read it. Like,
wow.
He'll just grab it out of my hands, toss it to Ariel, and like go sit over next to her. I'm like, oh, all right, thanks. Friends we've talked to say, oh, he can sense the baby. I don't know if that's true. Maybe. I mean, possibly, but he doesn't know what's happening. He still has no idea. So, but I'm sure we'll be in for a rude awakening when, or rather Ariel more so when I go back to work, and she's gonna have to be stuck at home trying to take care of a newborn, like you're talking about, just the demands that they have, and then on top of that, a toddler that is frankly a selfish being. You wouldn't expect anything else. So
Yeah.
But I mean, it has been really sweet too, though. It's been really, really sweet to just kind of soak in these last couple months with Baron, and has got so much personality, and he's so much spunk, and he's hilarious. He loves garbage right now, like not like just trash, but like he's got this garbage truck that he loves seeing the garbage truck.
Oh yeah.
Every Monday we try to make sure he gets to see it, um, and so he just freaks out over anything garbage, and he loves it. And it's just a weird part of his personality. But today literally he sat for like an hour by himself. He's got his little garbage truck, and he just keeps putting garbage in, taking it out, and then it came with like the little, like, it has the whole handle. It can pick up the dumpster and put it in, and so he just does that over and over, and
wow,
he loves it. That might be the career he chooses. But yeah, it's fun to just kind of sit back and watch him now. I mean, obviously part of me just wants to jump in and play with him, and I do, but it's also fun to just kind of sit back and watch him play by himself and just grow up and problem solve himself too. So
yeah, it's cool to watch when they start doing that independent play, and you just kind of observe the different types of games that they come up with, and it's like, this game makes no sense, but it's hilarious. Just an hour or two ago, Evelyn was feeding her Thomas the Tank Engine stuffed animal with her toy kitchen set. And with that, she took the pan, put it over his face, took the broccoli, and proceeded to smash the broccoli into the pan that was up against the face. And Amanda just looked at her and she was like, "He can't eat it that way. What are you doing?" And then Amanda did it to her, and she was like,
"Like, what are you doing?"
It's just, the games they come up with are beautiful.
Yeah.
But I will say,
they really are.
Definitely try to cherish the time, like you said, that you have with just Baron at the moment. Not that, it's bad to have a newborn. It's obviously a blessing. It's what we wanted. But there's definitely like a selfish part of you that's like, man, I miss just the three of us, where we could both at the same time just pour into Evie and interact with Evie and just do things, the three of us. Not to mention, she's so easy now, and the fact that like we just pop her into the car seat, we drive, we don't even really take a go bag anymore. She's she's quite self-sufficient in a lot of ways now, and then you hit the reset button and you're back at square one, and it's just it's a lot. But I'm glad that you guys are already being intentional and really trying to enjoy your last little bit of just Baron.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, we look forward to LSR when he gets born, but at the same time, really soaking in those moments. But I am curious, did you guys end up getting any PPTPs?
No, and maybe everybody's gonna call me an idiot for not knowing this, especially because I've already had a kid. But if you take, which yes, I have been peed on, so it's not a foolproof plan. But if you take your wipe and go right underneath the diaper, right below the belly button, back and forth with the cold wipe before you take the diaper off, it induces their peeing. Like, have you ever noticed that that Baron pees like as soon as you pull the diaper down? It's because of that cold air going in there. And so, or when you wipe first, then they pee. I don't know how I didn't learn this with Evelyn, but I looked up like, okay, there's got to be a better way than getting peed on every time I change diaper, because we didn't buy any of the PPTPs. And so I looked up like how to not get peed on by a boy, because of course there were a couple of times I'm like doing that. Yeah. Like I reach out and catch it so it doesn't go all over the place. But
right.
Yeah, I looked it up. Try it with, Baron's probably past that for the most part at this point.
Yeah, he is.
But yeah, with LSR, when he comes, try it. Use that, and then wait 15-30 seconds, let him get it out, and then more often than not, you're not going to get peed on. So the more you know.
That is great news. That is great news.
The more you know. The more you know.
Oh, that sounds like a perfect transition to our quick segment here, Riddles in the Dark, where we take our 3-in-1 Lord of the Rings copy and try to stump each other with a sentence or two of dialogue, and we're trying to find the context and the characters who's speaking, stuff like that. So you want to go first this time, or you want me? What are you thinking? What are you feeling, dude?
I don't know what I'm feeling,
Exhausted
to be honest
dad of
with
2.
you. What's that?
I said exhausted dad of 2. What are you feeling? You get to choose.
Oh man, I like this quote, but it's so easy.
I also found one that I like that is very easy.
Maybe we just take the easy victories where we can get them. Actually, I'll do this one. This one's a little bit more obscure and challenging.
Okay.
You ready? Got those listening ears on?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Blank was silent for a moment. I do not like this news, he said at last. That Gandalf should be late does not bode well. But it is said, do not meddle in the affairs of wizards, for they are subtle and quick to anger. The choice is yours, to go or to wait.
Well, that is obviously Strider in Bree talking with, or is it Strider or is it? They're in Bree. It's the hobbits talking, right? Am I wrong on all accounts?
This face looks a lot better now that I have a mustache.
It does not.
You are incorrect on both accounts.
Okay. That's kind of.
If I give you,
I know the quote.
Yeah. I wonder if it's different in the movies. I wonder if that's why it's messing with you. Because this character's not in the movies. Well, he kind of is briefly, but not really. If I give you,
the only thing that
go ahead.
I was gonna say the only thing that I think of is when they're supposed to be meeting at Bree and Gandalf's not there, and so he's talking to Strider. But
let me give you the next line, and it'll completely give it away. And it is also said, answered Frodo, go not to the elves for counsel, for they will say both no and yes.
Okay. Yeah. So it is the Fellowship of the Ring. And they're talking to the Wood Elves in the Shire as they're journeying. Sam's already fast asleep and or pretending to be asleep rather at Frodo's feet. What's that guy's name? I know it. Does it start with a G?
It does, and he's of the house of. We've talked about him before on the podcast.
We have Gwan.
All right. We're done. It's Gildor and Glorian of the House of Finrod.
That's right, Gildor. Yeah.
I think there's a picture of him in the Council of Elrond, and that's like the extent of him being, in the books, but or in the movies, I mean.
Well, now I'm gonna see if there's anything better on this page.
Great podcasting here.
Yeah, no, this is great. Okay.
Here we go.
Not in Middle Earth, nor until the lands that lie under the wave are lifted up again. Then in the Wellow Meads of Tarsiranan, we may meet in the spring. Farewell.
Is that Treebeard speaking to Merry and Pippin at the end of the Return of the King?
Nope. Book is correct.
Read it one more time.
Not in Middle Earth, nor until the lands that lie under the wave are lifted up again. Then in the Willow Meads of Tassiranan we may meet in the spring. Farewell.
Golly. I almost want to say it's Galadriel. Is it Galadriel speaking to...
Do you want to say, or you kind of want to say?
I want to say it's Galadriel.
Be a man.
That's what I said. I want to say it's Galadriel.
So is that what you're saying?
Yes. Galadriel final answer, speaking to the hobbits before they part to go to Lothlorien. Is that right? Well, the elves are leaving to go to Lothlorien, and the hobbits are going through the Gap of Rohan back to the Shire on the east-west road. Yeah.
Yes, many partings that would be. And then the paragraph right after that is, last of all, Merry and Pippin said goodbye to the Old Ent. So you were kind of, you were on the same page, but of course didn't get who was talking.
I got there.
You did.
Speaking of that, have you read that chapter recently at all, or do you remember it? There's this.
No,
I wish I had it right here. It's kind of just a quick aside, but there's this part where it's basically like Gandalf, Elrond, and Galadriel and Celeborn are all just like sitting off to the side, staring at each other, and they're communicating, but they're not speaking out loud. They're just telepathically communicating.
That's wild. I don't remember that at all.
I kind of want to. No, it's not the. It's not the topic though, so we need to get moving. But
sure. We do.
I listened to that recently because I just finished going through the trilogy again, and I was like, man, what in the world? But yeah.
I don't remember that at all, actually. But well, I was looking to see if we had any tidings of the Fellowship, but I don't think we do at this moment in time. We do have 10 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts.
I think we have 12 on Spotify at a 4.8.
Yeah, I was gonna say I think we're 4.8 on Spotify, so a bit more critical over there on that platform than our positive folks on Apple.
But hey, 12 reviews. We have 22 total reviews. That's like, I think it's safe to say it's not all mom at this point, right?
No, I think it is safe to say, and that's more than the amount of reviews that were on the grinder that I got for my pour over coffee set. So we're good to go.
I'm glad that you specified coffee set.
Coffee bean grinder. Golly. Okay. All right.
It took me a second. I was like, where are you going with this?
I should have, I suppose, been more specific.
I wasn't sure if your students had made you a certain account or
like
a prank, but
no. No.
Okay.
That's no. All right. Well,
all right.
We'll jump into what is on my shirt, the meat and potatoes of the podcast. So, Seth, why don't you just kind of tell us, because you were the one that decided to kind of come up with this story. I'd never read the story before. I had never heard about it before. And I think we have kind of differing takes on it so far that we'll get into here. But why don't you just tell us, what's the topic? What's the Mariner's Wife? Who is that? Why is that important?
Yeah, so we're going to dive into the Unfinished Tales here, which is a fantastic book that's was compiled by Christopher Tolkien, Tolkien's son, obviously, J.R.R.'s son, that was kind of managing the Tolkien estate when it came to all of his writings. Basically, everything outside of The Hobbit and Lord of the Rings that's been published has been because of Christopher Tolkien. And the Unfinished Tales are a collection of different short stories that were never completed. And this one is probably the longest. Actually, I think it is the longest unfinished tale, and it's called The Mariners. Yeah, I think it's like 40, 50 pages, which is, I mean, it's a short story at that point, right? But it's called Aldarion and Erendis, or The Mariner's Wife. And this is all the way back at the beginning of the Second Age. This is on the island of Númenor primarily. It follows one of the kings of Númenor, and we'll get into all of that. And then his back and forth, I should say, between his love of the sea and being a mariner and exploring and venturing out, and his love for a woman that we'll see how all that turns out. So it's a very interesting story, and it's one that, as Sam and I talk about all the time with Tolkien's works, that it's, even though it's not complete allegory, it's not super like one for one to our lives today. It's very applicable in the social aspect of it, the psychological aspect of the characters and the things that they're battling. And just, I say it all the time, but the reason Tolkien is so revered is he understands the human condition to a very fundamental level. And this story is one that I think probably would resonate with a lot of different people. So that's kind of the backstory of it, why it's important. But we'll kind of start off here. So like I mentioned, this is about one of the kings of Númenor, which Númenor was gifted to the three houses of the Edain that helped fight during the War of Wrath on the side of the elves and the Valar. Again, the War of Wrath is when Morgoth was finally defeated. It marked the end of the end of the First Age, the beginning of the Second Age. And at that, well, not quite there, was the cutoff. But anyways, we ended up with Elrond and Elros, which were the half elven, right? And Elrond decided to retain his immortality to take the path of the firstborn, remain an elf, whereas Elros decided, hey, I'll become a man, and yes, I'll live an extremely long time. I think he lived to around 500 years, but he gave up his immortality for the life of a man. And so the island of Númenor was gifted by Ulmo, one of the Valar, to these men from the houses of the Edain, and the mariners were actually of Círdan the shipwright, and they just ferried across these men to the island of the Star out in the ocean. It's kind of it's west of Middle Earth, but not the far west. They can kind of glimpse Tol Eressëa, which is like the outlying island of Valinor. So it's kind of out in the middle of the ocean. It's the island of the Star. And with that, this is where we pick up the story. It's the sixth king. Well, we pick up with the fifth king, basically. And then Tar Aldarion is the sixth king in his journey through becoming king and everything else that we'll get into. But we do actually have, I just wanted to shout this out real quick. We do have 3 episodes on Númenor regarding, I think the first one was like the geography and the types of people and like kind of the description of the island, things like that. And then the second episode was about the kings and queens. We kind of dive into each of them a little bit. And then the last episode, we did a 3-part series. Like I said, it was the Akalabeth, or the fall of Númenor. So just a little shout out to those episodes if you're interested in it. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And it's good to just kind of reference back to as we talk through just the customs and the places too. Seth did a really good job of doing all the geography in those episodes too. So kind of knowing where we're talking about as we dive into this. But just a little backstory on Tar Aldarion. Again, if you don't remember from those episodes or you didn't listen to him, Tar means high or king. So it was just kind of the title that each Númenorian king was given. You know, it was just
In
Tar
Quenya.
all the way down. And Quenya, yeah. Then they ended up changing that to R. You get that with R Farazan when you have more the Kingsmen as opposed to the faithful and stuff like that. But again, we already talked about that. So go listen to those podcasts if you're interested. But he was born in 700 of the Second Age, and he was also had a name Anardil as well. Like Seth said, he was the 6th king of Númenor and ruled for 192 years, so quite a long time. He was the first king to travel from Númenor to Middle Earth, though he wasn't the first person. His maternal grandfather, Viennator, I would say. Viennator.
Yeah, something like that.
I don't know. He was the first one to actually go there, but he was of the captains. He was one of the captain of the king's ship. So again, he was the first king to actually leave Númenor and go, but not the first person, for what it's worth. But he was son to Tar Meneldur, which is a very big character in this story. He also had the name Elentirmo, meaning Star Watcher, and he was known for his star lore and wisdom. Spent a lot of time looking at the skies and studying them and observing the stars. He even constructed a tower in the northern part of Númenor for a star so that he could continue to gaze. And Tolkien puts it this way: he was a man of gentle mood, without pride, who exercise was rather in thought than in deeds of the body. So it's very interesting that his son, as Seth will get into as we kind of continue talking about this, his son is very different than that. You know, his son needs to experience things like with the body, outside the body, and as opposed to just like his dad's totally content with just looking at stars, or kind of like his exercise was brain power, right? It was feeding knowledge. It was, you know, gaining all the knowledge, the wisdom he could, as opposed to the experiences he could, which is what his son really desired. So that is kind of setting the stage.
Yeah. So just a little bit more context here. In Númenor, the kings would actually abdicate the throne prior to passing away. In the earlier years, it wasn't until the R's started becoming kings where they wanted to hold on to the power all the way through till death. And so at this time, the kings, like I said, would abdicate the throne early and seemingly in the prime of their lives, but they would choose when was the right time for me to pass on the throne to my heir. And so at this time, kingship was given over to the eldest son, because if I remember correctly, Aldarion has a couple of older sisters.
Yes.
He does. Okay. But he is the eldest son, and it's not actually until his, as Lane and Ez might say, crotch fruit, until his child
Ariel
comes
hates
along.
that.
I know, so does Amanda. She's
I've
like,
I've
that just
I've
isn't
joked about
polite. That's funny.
that.
I think
I
it's
love
funny,
it
but
though. So
it's not
good.
until his come along that he decides to change that. So up until this point, the throne gets handed down to the eldest son, and that is Aldarion. So just before we get really into the story, I wanted to preface this with something that Tolkien, kind of just a little quote that he gave about this in letter 276. He actually said, "Now nearly complete concerning the story of Aldarion and his tragic relations with his father and wife. This is supposed to have been preserved in the downfall when most of Númenorian lore was lost, except that which dealt with the First Age, because it tells how Númenor became involved in the politics of Middle-earth." So Tolkien used this story. He never completed it, but his goal was to use this story to really connect why the Númenorians have a say in Middle-earth.
So something just kind of dawned on me, and this might be like blasphemy against the professor. So please, I need to be rebuked, rebuke me. But I was just thinking about that. He's like, in a letter where he sent like, oh yeah, it was left unfinished because it was lost and wasn't preserved in the downfall of Numenor. Or did you just not want to finish it? And you're like, hey, it's perfect. I could just say it was lore that was lost, and I don't have to finish it. It could be blasphemy, but I mean, he set his world up so well that he could, there is a lot of like intentionally unfinished lore that was lost, or things that don't have answers to them, so that our characters, our heroes, had to figure that out for themselves. But I don't know. I was just thinking about that. I was like, I wonder if people like got questions about, well, what is the rest of this, and he's like, nah, got lost in the wave. I don't know.
I mean, you very well could be correct. I mean, if you think about the time that, and we'll get back to the story here in a second, but if you think about the time that Tolkien was writing all of this, he was doing it all by hand. He didn't have a typewriter. He didn't hire anybody to write it for him. He just had papers scattered everywhere. And he was, with his world, I'm sure that, he started doing something and set that aside and probably forgot about it, started diving into other things, and that paper got buried, and who knows? It very well could have been something that he at one point was like, all right, well, I meant to finish this, but hey, it's convenient. Throw it in that, the lore was lost. This is all we remember. So anyways,
just a thought.
Yeah, no, it makes perfect sense. We're going to go ahead and jump into the story here. This will be a multi-podcast. I don't know how many, probably 2, maybe 3, just because it is a pretty long story. So we'll cover what we can here today. But the story really begins by discussing Tarman Eldor, who is Aldarion's father, and Tolkien describes him as a good man who is a wise king and always attempted to enrich his knowledge. Kind of like Sam was saying, he was the stargazer. He was known for his wisdom. And his wife was actually named Almarion, and she was the daughter to Vignetor, the captain of the king's ships under Tar Elendil. Now, that's not to be confused with Elendil the Tall that came to Middle-earth as, the Númenorian king after the downfall, but actually Tar Elendil, who was the 4th king. It would have been the 4th king of Númenor.
Yep.
And Aldarion, like we had kind of already briefly touched on, is nothing like his dad. He was unlike his father and more like his mother, but really took after his grandfather and spent a lot of time with him in the ships and learning from him. And so that's really where he got his mood from. But like Sam mentioned, he was originally named Anardil at birth, which meant devoted to the sun, but that quickly changed to Aldarion a little later on. But he was described as growing swiftly to manhood, of great stature, strong, vigorous in mind and body, golden-haired as his mother, ready to mirth and generous, but prouder than his father and ever bent on his own will. And as we will find out very quickly, that is just really the main downfall of his personality is his pride. It almost reminds me of Turin a little bit.
Yeah, I was thinking about that. Yeah.
He has the right motives, but his pride gets in the way frequently. But anyways, he loved shipbuilding and shipcraft and marining. Is that a word? I don't know.
Sailing.
Sailing. Love sailing. So he spent a lot of time with his grandfather on the eastern coast of Númenor and Romena. And that's actually where Elendil and his sons Isildur and Anarion actually sailed away from later on the east side. But before he was fully grown, it was said that he could captain a ship of many men from haven to haven. So not quite out in the open waters, but sailing around the island before he was a fully grown man, was able to captain an entire ship by himself and sail around. So definitely this is an area of strength for him. But really where his story picks up is in his 25th year, Vignetur invited him to sail to Mithlond, which is in the Grey Havens in Middle Earth, which is where the hobbits and everybody at the end of the Lord of the Rings sail away from. So this is an invitation from his grandfather to actually go to Middle Earth for the first time. He's never been off the island. So his grandfather really wanted him to experience this because his grandfather was like, this is my last trip. Let's go together. You can meet Círdan, you can meet Gil-galad, the High King of the Noldor at the time, and just kind of at your 25th year experience something like nothing before.
Yeah, which I don't know if his grandfather knew what exactly he was going to start or incite, but obviously this Meldor, Aldarion's father, being wise and foresight and just kind of knowing the tendency of his son already up to this point, he counsels him. He lets him go, but he does so hesitantly, and he says, as I quote, "Do as your heart calls, but do not become enamored with the great lands, you who one day must be king and father of this isle." So he's saying, like, again, you can go and I want you to enjoy yourself, but you belong here. Like, I'm gonna die, or I want to pass off my baton to you. I want you to be king. Like, that's just kind of your destiny. You are born into this family, and that's what your calling is going to be. So Aldarion, he goes and travels far in Eriador and befriended Gil-galad and Círdan, and it was over a 2-year long trip, and there was some delay that was attributed to Aldarion learning all that he could from Círdan about shipbuilding, like Seth mentioned. Like, that was, I imagine it was one of those things where his grandfather's like, "All right, buddy, like, time to go," and he's like, 5 more minutes, or 5 more months, whatever
as
it is.
Evelyn does, she negotiates. Evelyn, 3 more minutes. She puts her hands up, tries to count on her fingers. No, I need more time. Are you negotiating? Yes. That's exactly what you're describing.
That's what I'm thinking. Yeah. But man, this trip, it set a love of the sea and a desire to explore in his heart, and that's something that I think a lot of men. This is where, as Seth mentioned earlier, just the connections to just our personalities and the way we're wired. I think a lot of men love this idea of hiking, exploring, and uh, venturing off, doing new things. Anytime I see like a big rock I can climb just for the fun of it, I do it.
Yep.
Like, I mean, I'm sure that's what Tolkien was experiencing too. Like, he was a homebody, he was a hobbit for sure, but he still, had this idea of adventure, and he wanted to live that out, maybe more so in his mind, like Meneldor, than like his counterpart here on Aldarion. But still, definitely something as men we can relate to for sure. But this trip really set him on a whole new trajectory. He was never the same, and would not be bound to any land for any reason. He just wanted to go and adventure beyond the seas and sail all over the place. So after this, like Seth mentioned, that was his grandfather's last sailing, but he gifted him his ship, which I'm gonna try to. I think I could do this right. Numaramar. I don't know if the double R is like a like you have to roll it.
You have to rings of power it.
Right, exactly. But it just means west wings. So he gives this ship to Aldarion, which, I mean, that's pretty sweet. I wish I could get a ship from a relative. But that's pretty cool. When you're the king's son, I guess there's perks to that. But
there's quite a few, yes.
Yeah. Within 3 years, he had set sail for Lindon and was away for 3 years, and returned home for a short time before sailing to explore more of Middle Earth for another 4 years. So again, he was caught with the itch of sailing, and he wanted to just go and explore all he could and meet as many people as he could. And as we'll get into, there's some wisdom in that, and just kind of learning from other people and getting to know the happenings around Middle Earth, and in the world, but at the same time, he's definitely not content. Contentment is not.
Well, I'm back. So went to check on my wife, who is dealing with a screaming infant at the moment. So I wanted to step aside. So thank you, Sam, for allowing that to happen. Not that you had a choice. I was going to do it anyways, but we'll jump right in here. So as Sam was describing, the itch that Aldarion had was really spiked by that first trip to Middle Earth, and then he went back 2 more times after that. So he was gone for 3 years, 4 years, so like 9 years, right? In a very short period of time with these travels. So Tolkien,
which as a descendant of Elrond, or excuse me, Elros, that's not that long in the sense of 500 years,
right?
But you think about, for me, like that's a decade of my life. That's my entire relationship with Ariel. That's crazy.
Right. Yeah.
To just be away. Yeah.
You make a good point. The time doesn't move the same for them as it does for us, but that's still a pretty long time.
And that'll play a part in this later on too.
Yes, it does indeed. So Aldarion really was very prideful, and he took his own counsel, often going against others' advice out of spite, especially his father, as we'll kind of get to. But Tolkien really just describes him as somebody that if you tried to push him in a direction, and I can relate to that. Just
I'm sure
it's one of my many flaws. But if somebody tells me to do something, even if I know they're right, it's like, nah, I'm not going to do it. I'll do it my way, which it's, like I said, one of my many flaws, but I can definitely relate to the way he feels. So in the year 750 of the Second Age, he actually founded the Guild of Venturers. And Tolkien says, to that brotherhood were joined all the hardiest and most eager mariners, and they called Aldarion the Great Captain. So he really was the man amongst men in Númenor at this time. And with that, he decided to build another ship. So he's just building all kinds of ships. He named this one Ambar, and he decided to make this his dwelling place. He had no desire to live in Armenelos, which was the city of the kings in Númenor. And so he decided, I'm just going to live on a ship and sail around from coast to coast, around the island as I need to. But I'm not actually going to live on land. I'm going to live on my ship. And Tar Meneldor, his father, looked pretty coldly upon this and really didn't like it. And they have a lot of back and forth about what Aldarion's motivations are, what his place is as the heir to the throne, all this stuff. And he actually becomes estranged from his father at this time. And he stopped telling Dad he stopped reporting to Dad, stopped telling him what he was going to do, stopped explaining his plans, his motivations. They became estranged. But he always had the support of his mother, and his mother, maybe we'll get into this a little bit more later on, but it's like, I don't know if she's enabling or wise. And sometimes it's one and sometimes it's the other. It's interesting, but I can definitely see where she's coming from with a lot of her motivations. But
sure.
His father, Tar Meneldor, actually decided, he said, you are not allowed to fell any trees in Númenor for the building of your ships. And I think he was kind of hoping that would dissuade Aldarion from his shipcraft. And like Aldarion and any good man, that when he's told not to do something, he goes, oh, that's fine. I'll set up a haven in Venulande in Middle Earth, which is also called Londair, which is at the mouth of the Grey Flood in Middle Earth, like we said. So if you're ever looking at a map of Middle Earth, the Grey Flood is actually the river Gwathlo, which I believe is where Boromir loses his horse when he's traveling from Minas Tirith to the Council of Elrond. He loses his horse in Tharbad, which is right in that area. So it's a pretty prominent river in Middle Earth that plays a big role in not a big role, but it's definitely a landmark in the trilogy and stuff. So that was being explored by Aldarion from the year like 750, 800 of the Second Age. So anyways, he created a haven to serve as a shipyard for the repair of his ships, because he wasn't allowed to fell any trees in Númenor. His dad looked coldly upon everything. He was like, all right, fine, I'll just sail to Middle Earth. We'll start cultivating the forests there and create a haven for the repair of the ships. And Tarman Eldor did not really like that. So in the year 800 of the Second Age, he actually forbade Aldarion from venturing out, because he wanted to name him the heir to the king at this point. And so he said, you're not allowed to leave anymore. You're going to be the heir of the king. I'm using the power of the king, not as the father, but as the king, to keep you here. And we're going to reconcile, and you're going to be named the heir of the king. So by this time, Aldarion's 100 years old. So like Sam mentioned, the line of Elros, they live for a very long time. I forget how long Aldarion lived, but I think it was like 480 something. I don't know. It's over 400 years, I believe.
Yeah. Yeah.
So he's only 100 at this point. But at this point, his father reconciles with him, names him heir to the king, and then he gives him the name Lord of the Ships and Havens of Númenor. And they were reconciled, and he stayed on land in Númenor for a bit during this time. And it was actually during all this celebration that he beholds the beauty of Erendis for the first time.
Yeah, if my homeschool math is correct, which, who knows, but if he's, lived close to 500 years and he's 100 years old, that's like being in your 20s, like your early 20s, I guess, as far as I'm thinking of like the just maturity level and stuff, which I don't know, he's still human, so he probably still mature the same, but at the same time, like, I guess it gives him a little bit more grace for some of his actions, but at the same time, still, dude, you're 100 years old. What are you doing?
Right.
Settle down. But anyway, yes, he does behold the beauty of Erendis, and a little bit backstory on her. She was the daughter of a Beregar of the House of Beor, so she is not of the line of Elros, and so that means she does not have the long life that we were just talking about of Aldarion, and so this does have a big, huge role to play later on. But pretty much how they kind of interacted was, one day her father had brought her to the feast in which the prince Aldarion was proclaimed to be the king's heir. So it's a big celebration. They're there, and there her eyes were captured by the beauty and the splendor of Aldarion. She just like looked and was like, wow, okay, you're hot, man. You got riz, you got game. And so the Queen Almerion, she, again, notices, oh, okay, this is a beautiful young lady, and she seems to be interested in my son. That's good. And so, she's like, okay, I should probably intervene, do what mothers do a little bit.
Play a little matchmaker.
Exactly. But Aldarion, being a dude, just didn't even really notice Erendis at all. And it wasn't until the day that he departed to go to Middle Earth on one of his many travels that Erendis accompanied the queen to send off Aldarion. So this was like kind of a custom that they had. All the women would come down and kind of send off the men and do it that way. And so, but this time specifically, the queen had asked Aldarion, he's like, is nothing keeping you in Númenor? Like, do you care about anything out here? And he answers, not yet. And then he kind of like looked at Erendis, and so Erendis is like, well, not yet. Hey, maybe that means he's looking at me. Maybe that means that something will keep him in Númenor later on. So she believes that these words were for her as well, and kind of teasing the potential relationship that they might have.
Yeah,
so
he actually, I think at this point, doesn't he say something along the lines of, but there are things here more fair than anywhere else? Like he says, like, I'm not yet, but there are things here more fair than elsewhere, basically.
Yes, exactly. Which, so yeah, that's kind of hinting like, oh, maybe it's the lady Erendis right there. But he's gone for 7 years, which again is just that's just a long time. Again, even though you live for a long time, like that's just a long time to be away. And he returns, and there's this long discourse with his dad where they have this big old fight about his responsibilities. Again, his dad wants him to stick around. He wants him to be the heir of to actually take the throne, to be king, and he wants to keep exploring. And he says, like, what need have we of more silver and gold unless to use it in pride where our other things would serve us well? And so he's just fighting his dad on all things. They're just not connecting, they're not agreeing on anything. And when he was being pushed by his father to find a wife and settle down and become king, Aldarion responds, he's like, yeah, one day, sure, but not before I must. And later, if any trust try to thrust me towards marriage. So he's saying, you keep trying, I'm going to keep delaying this thing. Other things I have to do more urgent to me, for my mind is bent on them. So this guy has no desire to settle down. He has no desire to start a family. Again, it to me, and this is maybe where we disagree a little bit, as we just kind of, I remember I texted you like, this guy's kind of a jerk. Like he's kind of selfish. And I think at this point, if I'm looking at, like, if that's my friend or if that's my son, I'm like, dude, just stop. Like, get over yourself. Yeah, you have this desire to adventure, but you also have responsibilities. And what's it going to be? Choose now who you will serve. Pretty much is how I would be like, all right, we just got to figure something out. But I digress.
Yeah, no, I can definitely see where you're coming from. I think, I don't know, it is a hard one because he does have these responsibilities. He is the heir to the throne. He did accept, Manildor's saying, I want you to be the heir to the throne. So in accepting that, now he, gets, he shoulders the responsibility of everything that comes along with that. So yeah, he is kind of a jerk, but he also, I get where he's coming from. He was reluctant in the first place. He doesn't like land ever since he was 25 years old. So for 75 plus years at this point, he has had no interest in Armenelos and being king and any of this stuff. And not to mention, he just keeps fighting with his dad over it. So I definitely get where he's coming from as well. But during this time, he actually stayed in Númenor for a little while, and he actually spent a lot of time with Erendis, as his mother Almerion was playing matchmaker, like Sam had discussed. And even though they were doing that, he still spent most of his free time on the grand ship, the Peleran, which is the Far Wanderer, that was named after his desire to just continue exploring. And at this, it was actually a little bit of an interesting discourse. And Sam, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, but Manildor actually talked to Almerion and was like, hey, it's pretty cruel to play matchmaker between these two when it's clear that Aldarion is not ready for this. And the queen actually looks at her husband and is like, well, what better way to cure Aldarion from this sea longing than to find love and have a reason to be tied down? So I'm just curious, who do you tend to side with on that? Because I don't know which. I see both sides of it.
It reminds me of that failure to launch. Is it that Matthew McConaughey where he's living with his parents and they hire this girl to fall in love with him, or something like that?
Yep.
No, knowing like what he told his father about, like, I'm gonna delay it even longer if somebody's trying to push it on me. That's where I probably agree with Manildor, because he's had that discourse with him already. Have been like, the dude doesn't want this right now, and if he even like sniffs that this is our doing, it's gonna be pushed back even further, and it's gonna keep hurting this poor girl who just is infatuated with this guy for whatever reason. And again, she's not of the line of Elros, which we'll get into, but like she can't wait 20, 30, 40 years for marriage like Aldarion can and wants to. And so I get both sides. I think, as a mom, she's probably like, trying to play her last card. She's been, I don't know. I notice just with family and like Ariel's family, especially, it seems like there's a very sweet spot for a mom and her son, and like Ariel feels that for Bear, but then also Ariel's mom feels that for her son Alex, and it's almost like you just kind of let whatever go and you just try to keep the relationship, regardless of the attitude or the behaviors or anything else like that. So I wonder if Tolkien kind of had that understanding too. Maybe he was looking at Edith with Christopher and was like, all right, man, yeah, she's just bending over backwards for this kid. Does whatever he wants. But I don't know. I think I probably side a bit more on Manildor on this side of things, just knowing where Aldarion's mind is at this point.
Yeah, I think you're spot on with that. And I think especially this is kind of where the male and female brain differ, in that Menildor understands that Aldarion can still be very interested in Erendis, but have her as second in his mind. Whereas Erendis is going to bump Aldarion to the very peak, the very pinnacle of her thought processes. And so he's basically saying, like, hey, this is pretty cruel, because we know that Aldarion, even if he falls for her, he's still going to be playing tug of war in his head, whereas Erendis is just going to be strung along on a tightrope, hoping that she can make it across before the rope, inevitably breaks.
Exactly.
So I do think you are spot on in that. I would probably agree with Menildor on this one. But anyways,
nice hearing those words from you. I don't do that very often.
Oh, come on. You're wise beyond
that I'm spot on something. Come on.
You're wise beyond your years. I just can't say it too often,
Yeah. Keep the head small.
Too late. But at this point, his ship that he was building, the Pelarion, the Far Wanderer, he actually completes this. And even though he is kind of falling for Erendis and he really likes her and has spent a lot of time with her, he decides, you know what? I've got my itch. It's time for me to sail off into the distance again. And so he decides he's going to dip and jump on a ship and sail away. And Menildor hates this, and he says, like, you cannot go. And at this point, the Númenorians had I guess you'd call it just like what's the word I'm looking for?
Like a tradition?
Yes, a tradition. My sleep brain, my infant brain is not working great right now. But yeah, they have a tradition where they would bring the green bough of return that was cut from the tree Oilare. I don't know how to say it. It's Oilare, which means ever summer, which was a gift from the Eldar to the Númenorians. So there's this green bough of return that is brought to the ship that they would put on the front of the ship, and it was like a token towards Ase and Uinen, who are the Maiar of the sea, basically, as like, hey, it's a token of friendship, protect our ship, help us get home safely. Which, quick side note, go check out our episodes concerning the Maiar for a great conversation about like the hierarchy of Tolkien's beings, and we actually dive into Ase and Uinen quite a bit, if I remember correctly, because Ase is very masculine energy, quick to anger, just kind of wants chaos, and Uinen brings balance to him, and it's a interesting relationship that those two Maiar have. But
yeah, the mariners love Uinen a lot more.
yes, because she's the one that protects the ships and restrains Ase from.
He's the one that just throws storms for no reason.
Yeah,
whatsoever.
Yeah,
exactly. Like tornado, hurricane.
So,
which, as a guy, if you have that power, of course, why wouldn't you? But
I mean, yeah, it's pretty sweet. It's like a pyromaniac kind of, but Aldarion decides to go ahead and sail away, but Menildor, like we mentioned, is completely opposed to this, and the tradition was for like his mother to come and bring that green bough of return, and Menildor actually decides that he's like, no, nobody is putting this on here. I forbid anybody from doing it from our house, like anybody that's related from doing it. And Erendis hears about that, and she goes up to Almerian, the queen, and says, hey, he didn't say I couldn't do it. So if you go cut the green bough of return from the tree and give it to me, I'll go take it to Aldarion with your best wishes, basically. And the queen agrees to this. And so at this point, Aldarion's not expecting any green bough of return. He's, frustrated and he's ready to sail away. And then here comes Erendis carrying this mighty token for him. And Tolkien explains that this is when Aldarion first looked upon Erendis with love, not just like infatuation, not just, hey, she's really pretty, but like actual love. And Tolkien actually says that he hastened his return and cut his trip shorter than he planned to this time around because he was thinking about Erendis so much. And on his way back, he actually brings a diamond, that Tolkien says is worth more than any of the other riches he brought back from his travels. And I believe it was a diamond that was given to him by Gilgalad or Círdan, if I'm remembering that correctly. So it's a very, very beautiful and valuable stone. And when he gets back, he gives that to Erendis as like a thank you. And Manildor actually rebukes Aldarion for this, and he says it shouldn't be, a gift of that magnitude should not be given to anybody unless it's given as a betrothal gift, like, hey, will you marry me? And this is kind of where we'll leave off, but Aldarion looks at his dad and he says, I brought it in gratitude. I brought it for a warm heart amid the coldness of others.
Oof. Yeah, they just have such a tough relationship. They really do. Which again, I feel for both in some ways. Probably more for Manildor than I do for Aldarion. Just like, the dude just wants to like be with his son, and I get that. Like he just wants to teach his son. He wants his son to be like him in a lot of ways. He wants his son to be better than him, but also be the king. I mean, you just feel bad for him, but at the same time, he's not responding the best way either. And so, I mean, that line from from Aldarion, like, you were the one that was, you didn't bring me anything, so I'm bringing something back to somebody who cared about me, because you don't obviously care about me, is what he's feeling. And so it's a hard, yeah, it's a really, really hard, which again, Tolkien didn't have any interaction with his own earthly father really at all. I mean, right? I mean, his dad died when he was just a young boy, and so it's interesting just seeing like how much he grasps maybe from other relationships or other friends and their like experiences or whatever. But I mean, this is stuff that I see other dads. I've talked to students of mine that have these issues with their dads, or even parents of our students that are like, I just want to hang out with my son. Like, it's a very relatable story. Obviously, not with sailing across the world and being king and having your son like be the king, but in a lot of different ways, in more modern terms, there's a lot of parallels for sure.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. It is interesting that you make a good point about how Tolkien picked up on all of this, and I wonder if part of it too is just he was such a well-read person. With how much he wrote, he read even more, right?
True.
I don't know. Maybe he just was able to learn from reading and from observation, but like I said at the beginning of the podcast, he really understands the human condition on a very fundamental level. And these are the types of things that may seem kind of trivial, just disagreeing, with somebody, but especially when it's your father and in a situation like that, I just speaking for myself, thankfully, I don't really recall having to feel that, in my childhood, thankfully. I don't know if you did, but I really don't recall having to feel that at all. But I can imagine how painful it is for both father and son when they disagree on such an extreme level.
Absolutely. Yeah. It definitely sets the rest of the story up for a lot of drama, a lot of turmoil. But again, just relatable family stuff that we'll get into here at some point whenever we're able to. But any final thoughts on this portion? Because like Seth said, this is going to be at least 2 episodes, maybe 3. So we're gonna stop here and get into some more of that relation aspect between Erendis and Aldarion here in the next episode. But any other final thoughts?
No, I'm just curious by the time we get to the end of it, what your thoughts are. And I don't know, I like this story. It's not a heartwarming story. I watched a YouTube video about somebody kind of doing a quick overview of this, and he says that it's Tolkien's like only failed marriage. Which, spoiler alert, sorry.
Yeah, jeez. Gosh.
I didn't even think of that until I said it. But I'm sure you could see it coming. People have foresight, right? But it's not exactly a happy story, but it's almost like a warning, It's almost like a warning in the form of a fairy story, like Tolkien loved to write.
Yeah.
So
yeah, we talked a lot about that in Children of Hurin too. There's a lot of warnings with Turin's personality, and yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, so I'm looking forward to doing the rest of this. Like you mentioned, who knows when we're gonna try, but I'm glad we were able to. I know this is a shorter episode, but it's nice just popping on here and getting to discuss a little bit of Tolkien with you, buddy.
Oh, it's a breath of fresh air for me, for sure. Still haven't something we should have said at the beginning of the podcast. Neither of us have still seen War of the Rohirrim, so if you've seen it, give us your thoughts. It goes on streaming, I think, next month, so I'll probably.
Don't you have to pay the $25 to do it though, to watch it, or is that right now?
You can do that. You can do that now. Yeah. It'll go on, I think, like HBO Max for free in February, which my father-in-law has. So ta-da! That'd be something I'll give it a shot. But again, our hopes aren't necessarily that high, as why we haven't really spent time to go see it. But if you've seen it and you liked it or disliked it or were indifferent, let us know. We'd love to hear your thoughts on that, as it's extra Tolkien content to talk about. So with that, this is the part of the podcast where we break in the house of Meduseld and shout, Gondor calls for aid. Will you, Rohan, answer? If you enjoyed the podcast, please light a beacon of your own by sharing it with fellow friends and fans. And don't forget to like, subscribe, leave a review, not just on here, on any of our podcast platforms, but on YouTube as well. Don't forget to share your Tolkien story with us too if you've been listening for a little while. Scott Marion, waiting to hear yours, man. I mean, you keep listening, you keep texting me saying like, "Oh, I love the podcast." Like, dude, I know you don't love Tolkien that much, like you've talked about that, but I'd still love to hear your thoughts. So send us some thoughts.
Tolkien
David,
story
again, thank you.
Scott's Tolkien story is literally just going to be listening to the podcast.
Yeah, maybe. And hey, if that's all it is, then great. At least we can be a good running companion for him. He's still going strong. It's 1,700 days straight that he's been running. It's insane. Crazy. But if you haven't shared your Tolkien story and you've been listening, we'd love to hear from you. You can email wekpodcast@gmail.com or just find us on social media or something else as well. But we'll be diving into more of the Mariner's Wife, Aldarion and Erendis next time. But until then, we thank you for stepping out on the road with us and joining us for some well-earned comforts. Until next time, we bid you a very fond farewell.
Nicely done.